Hi there, my name is Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking about the basics of creating formulas in Microsoft Excel. So just a few things up front. So for this tutorial, I'm using Microsoft Office 2016. I'm using a PC and I'm running Windows 10. If you have a different version of Microsoft Office, or if you're on a Mac or you have a different operating system, you might notice slight differences between your version of Excel and mine, but generally everything that I say in this video should apply to you as well. So first, let's start with how to type a formula. So in order to type a formula, you have to tell Excel that you want to type a formula, and so there are three ways to do that. The first and most popular way is to use the equal sign. So when I type in an equal sign into a cell, it just readies Excel to know that everything that comes after is some sort of function or some sort of operation. And so once I've done that, I can type in something simple like 5 plus 5, and Excel, when I press enter, will return 10. Another way that I can prep Excel for a formula is to use the plus sign or the minus sign. So if I use plus, Excel now knows I'm typing a formula, and I can do again 5 plus 5. And the way Excel reads this is plus 5, which is just positive 5, plus 5. And that should return, again, 10. If I use the minus sign, so I do minus 5 plus 5, Excel will read this as negative 5 plus 5, and this should return 0 for us. So now that we know how to put a formula into a cell, I want to talk about some of the basic operators that you have available to you in Microsoft Excel. So we've talked a little bit about plus and minus, but you also have available multiplication, division, exponents, and parentheses. So if I wanted to do, like we've already done, equals 5 plus 5, that would give me 10. I could also do equals 5 minus 5, and this should give me 0. On the multiplication side, if I wanted to do equals 5 times 5, this should give me 25, which it does. And again, just to show you that, it's equals 5. And then the symbol for the multiplication is the asterisk, which on most keyboards, if you have a number pad, it might be on your number pad, but on most other keyboards, it will be above the number 8 on your keyboard. So you want to press Shift and 8 to get the asterisk, and 5. And then press Enter, and we have 25. We can also do division, so that would be equals 5 divided by 5. Enter, and that'll give me 1. And again, just to show you that, that's equals 5, and then the divided by symbol is a slash and a 5. And enter. And then if we wanted to do exponents, so let's say we wanted to see equals 5 raised to the third power. That should give us 125. And so just to show you that again, we have equals 5. And then the symbol for an exponent is the caret symbol. So we have, on most keyboards, that's going to be above your 6. So we do Shift and 6 to get the caret, and then 3. So this is 5 raised to the third power. We press Enter, and that gives us 125. And just like most mathematical expressions, you can put parentheses around things that you want to take place in a particular order within the order of operations. And so that brings us to our next point, which is order of operations. So Excel does pay attention to order of operations. So let me give you an example. If we were to do equals 5 plus 1 times 8. If you put this like this into most calculators, you're going to get 5 plus 1 is 6, and then times 8, and this would return 48. In Excel, because of order of operations, and order of operations are that parentheses, anything inside of parentheses happens first, followed by any exponents, and then any multiplication or division, and lastly, any addition or subtraction. So Excel is going to look at this and do order of operations, and it's going to say we do the multiplication first and then the addition. So this would give us 1 times 8 is 8, plus 5 is 13. Now with the parentheses, like I was mentioning, if we wanted Excel to do that in a different order, we could equals, we can open our parentheses, 5 plus 1, close our parentheses, and times 8. And so this is going to say, okay, everything in the parentheses needs to come first. So we do 5 plus 1, that's 6, and then we can multiply our 6 by 8, and this will actually give us 48. Great. So now we want to move on to cell referencing. So how can we use existing cells in Excel to run formulas? And this is really the bread and butter of what Excel is used for. So let's start out with a very basic cell reference. So I'm going to put a 10 into cell D10. And let's say that I want cell E10 to also equal whatever it is that D10 equals. So I can press my equal sign to let Excel know a formula is coming, and then I can click on cell D10. And so when that happens, you'll see here in blue, the cell reference for D10 appears. And so when I press enter, what's going to happen is now E10 is equal to cell D10, and so E10 becomes 10. And so now that these are linked, if I change the source, so if I were to change this to a 5, for example, the thing in cell E10 will automatically change to a 5. And if I change it to a 3, and if I change it to 1,000, everything is linked. You can also use these cell references in formulas. So for example, if I wanted to have equals, I wanted to take the sum of whatever is in cell E7 plus whatever it is in cell D10. I can put those in like that with my operators, and I press enter, and we've got the sum of those. And again, if I were to change the number that's in cell D10 from 1,000 to 70, so our original reference changes, but our formula also changes. So now instead of it being 125 plus 1,000, it's now 125 plus 70 equals 195. So the next thing to discuss here is relative versus absolute references. So what exactly do I mean by that? So by default, all of Excel's references are relative. And that means that if, for example, I were to copy this, this formula that we've done, so I copy this cell and I move it 2 cells to the right and 1 cell down, and I paste it here, I'm now getting 48. So let's think about why that's happening. So in our original formula, if I double click on this cell, I can look into the formula. We were referencing E7 plus D10. And then we picked this up and we moved it 2 cells to the right and 1 cell down. So in our new formula here that we've copied and pasted, we are no longer referencing E7, we're now referencing something 2 cells to the right, 1, 2, and 1 cell down, 48. And the same with this one, with the D10. We're no longer referencing D10, we're now referencing something 2 cells to the right and 1 cell down. So let's look into that formula and see that. So if we right-click this, or sorry, double-click this, we're now referencing, as I mentioned, G48 and F11. So we're 2 cells to the right and 1 cell down, 2 cells to the right and 1 cell down. So that's what relative references mean. And again, this is Excel's standard. So whenever you're copying and pasting formulas, You do have to be very careful about whether your references are relative or not. Now let's say, for example, that I don't want those to be relative. Let's say that no matter where I copy and paste this formula to, I want it always to reference cell E7 and cell D10. So what we can do is put $signs in front of each of the individual parts that we want to remain the same. So no matter where I pick this up, I want it to always reference column E and row 7, and for the second one, column D and row 10. So I've put a $sign in front of each of those individual pieces. On the 10, I only need $1 in front of the full number, not $1 in front of each individual number. So let's press enter. Nothing happens to our original formula, but now when I copy this and I paste it one cell down, our references remain the same. So we're still referencing E7 and D10. Now, if, for example, I wanted to keep only part of this absolute, so I didn't want the 7 to remain locked. So I want anytime I'm referencing this, I want it to always reference column E, but I want it to move down as I want the reference to move down as I move my formula down. But I always want to reference D10. So let's press enter there. So now that we've changed the formula, let's copy this and paste it. And so what do we have happen? We are still referencing D10 because our formula was locked, but here because because the 7 in the original formula was unlocked, and we moved it 1 down, now we're referencing E8. But if I pick that up, if I copy that here, and I move one cell to the right, and I paste that, we're still getting the same number because when I picked this one up, which is referencing E8, the E is locked. And so when I move this one cell to the right, the locked E tells me not to move the reference one cell to the right. So we're still referencing E8. So let's see. So next I want to talk about linking to other worksheets. So when you create a formula like this, you don't actually have to reference only the things in the worksheet you see. You can reference to other worksheets. So in sheet 2 here, for example, I have 3 numbers, 5, 10, and 15. And if I wanted to add all of those together, here's what I can do. I can press equals, and then I can go to the tab. I can click 5, and use my plus sign, click on the 10, my plus sign, and the 15. And so you'll see here in the formula that this is referencing cell B3, cell B4, and cell B5 all in sheet 2. And Excel's nomenclature here is that you have the sheet name followed by an exclamation point to tell Excel that this is everything that comes before it is a sheet. And then you have the cell reference on that sheet. So now if I press enter, I go back to my original sheet where my formula is, and we see that I have 5 plus 10 plus 15 is equal to 30. The rules about absolute and relative cell references that I mentioned previously also apply to these references to other sheets. So if I were to copy this and move it down one cell and over one cell, over to the right, now instead of referencing B3, B4, and B5 on sheet 2, I would be referencing C4, C5, and C6. And that's giving me 0. Let's figure out why. So if we go over to sheet 2, cell C4, C5, and C6, these are the 3 that I'm referencing, all are blank, and so those return zeros. One other note about cell referencing, so you can actually make references to other workbooks. So these are other Excel files that happen to be on your computer. You would set that up the exact same way you do these links to other worksheets. So you press an equals, and then you pull up the other workbook that you want to reference to. You click on the cell, and you press your Enter key, and you will have a link to that cell in another workbook. A word of caution against doing this: if after you set up that reference to your other workbook, anything about your folder structure or your file name or worksheet tabs inside of your workbook that you're linking to, if any of that changes, Excel isn't able to make any updates to that automatically, and your reference will break automatically. So any time that you need to make references to other workbooks, it's very important that you have full control over what your folder structure looks like, what your file names look like, and what your tab names are, because otherwise you run the risk of things in your file breaking and needing to go back in and like manually figure out where things have fallen apart. So anytime you make changes to those folder structures or file names, you need to make sure that you make a very organized effort to update all of your formula references accordingly. So on a related note, so in this formula where we just linked to sheet 2, you can see in the formula you have all of these are referencing to sheet 2. If within this workbook I change the name of sheet 2, so now if I call this tab 2 instead of sheet 2, when I go back to my formula, Excel, as long as you're within the same workbook, Excel is able to make those updates automatically for you. So Excel knows that anything that had a reference to sheet 2 should now be a reference to something called tab 2. So you can rely on Excel for that. So next I want to just talk about a couple of Excel's basic functions, basic just built-in functions. So let's build a quick data set. So let's have 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So there's just 5 numbers. So the first function we want to talk about is the sum function. And so the sum function just adds numbers together. So it's the same thing as using the plus sign, it's just a little bit of a fancier way, and if you have a range of numbers, it's a little bit quicker, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's start with the function. So the way you do this is press your equals sign, and then you type the function that you want, so equals sum for sum. And then after any function, you want to open parentheses. And so when you open parentheses, that tells Excel sum is the function that I want, and now I'm going to give you all of the arguments to my function. And so the sum function wants numbers. And so my first number, I'm going to use a cell reference, so I can put in 5. And then I'm going to press a comma, and that tells Excel I'm moving on to the second number. I could use 6, and then I use a comma. I could do 7, and then 8, and then 9. And lastly, I just want to show you that you can also, in addition to using cell references, you can use actual numbers. So if I put another comma in this formula and I type in 100, so what Excel is going to do with this is it's going to take the sum, or it's going to add the thing in cell D16, D17, D18, D19, D20, and the number 100. And so to finish up my formula, I just want to close my parentheses. That tells Excel that I've put in all of the arguments you need. I'm done, and you press enter. And so this is the sum of all of these numbers and 100. A slightly faster way to do this would be to use a range. So we can do equals sum, open my parentheses, and now instead of choosing each of these individual cells, I can click, hold my mouse down, and drag, until I've gotten all of the entire range that I want. I let go of the mouse, I close my parentheses, and I press enter. And so that gives me the sum of the range of numbers in here. Now you can also do this with your mouse, with your keyboard. So if I do equals sum, open my parentheses, and if I use the left arrow, that takes me to cell D16, and then I can hold down the shift key and press the down arrow to select this entire range. Then I let go of the shift key, I close my parentheses, press enter, that gives me the sum. So the next function works very similarly, so it's the average, so I can take the equals average of this range of cells, close my parentheses, enter. And so the average of these 5 numbers is 7. I can also find the minimum and the maximum. So we can do equals min for the maximum, or for the minimum, sorry. Open my parentheses, select my range, close my parentheses, and press enter. And that tells me that the minimum in this range is 5. And I can use the max, equals max, open parentheses, select my range, close my parentheses, and enter. And so the maximum in this is 9. And the last basic function I want to show you is the count function. So the count function, if within a range that you give it, will tell you how many of the cells in your range contain numbers. So if we do equals count, open my parentheses, select this range, and close parentheses, what I expect to happen is this will return 5 because in this range that I've selected, there are 5 cells with numbers in them. It doesn't matter what the values are, it only matters that there are numbers in the cell. So when I press enter, we get 5. And so just to show you how that works, if I were to do equals count and only select 4 of them, that should return 4. And if I do equals count and select all 5 plus a couple extra, so I have 10 cells in my range, I close my parentheses and press enter, it's still returning 5 because in the range I selected, only 5 of those cells have numbers. So the next thing that I want to discuss is the formulas tab in Excel. So if you go up here to the tabs and you click on the formulas, this will open the formulas ribbon. The major thing to look at here is Excel's built-in function library. So here you're going to have access to every function that Excel has for you. And Excel has grouped them into these nice categories, and you can press the drop-down menus and scroll through them and find various functions that you might need. But honestly, the easiest way to find a function would be this Insert Function button. So when you click the Insert Function button, a dialog box will come up where you can just type in anything, like a search box, like you would type into Google, and Excel will return functions that match the type of thing that you're looking for. And you can look through the descriptions and figure out which function you need. And then once you've selected a function, Excel essentially opens up a wizard for you to walk you through building that function. So I definitely recommend, opening this up, look through some of the functions that are available, test out the insert function feature, really get a feel for how to create functions in Excel. And then the last thing I want to point out is tracing precedence and tracing dependence. So let's build something really quick. So if we have a few numbers, 2, 3, and 4 in a data set, and we have a function that does equals 2 plus 3 plus 4. So if I'm ever looking at this, and it's much more complicated than what you see here on the screen, and I wanted to just visually see where are all of the where are all of the inputs to this formula coming from? If I click on the cell and I come up here to my Formulas tab and go into the Formula Auditing group and click on Trace Precedence. So what's going to happen is these blue arrows appear, and they're just showing you that the number 4, this cell is being used in this formula, this cell is being used in the formula, and this cell is being used in the formula. Now if these are much longer lines, so I'm going to actually remove the arrows and move this over here, equals that plus that plus that. And I trace my precedence one more time, so these are much longer lines. When I hover over these blue lines, if I double click on one of them, it actually takes me to the precedence cell. And so if you had a situation where you have a very large workbook and you'd have to scroll quite a ways to find out where the end of this blue line is, you can just double click on it and it takes you to the other end. So let me remove arrows. On the flip side of that, if you are ever looking at a cell and you're curious about what cells might use that, might reference that cell, you can click on the cell and come up here to Trace Dependence. And so this will also create the blue arrows, but it will now show you what cells rely on the cell you've selected. So for example, the one we were talking about, 9, relies on the 2, and then as a surprise, and I wasn't expecting this, the 7 also relies on the 2, and that's because if you remember when we created this count formula, we extended our range further down, and so the 2 is actually included in our range. And then, as I did a few moments ago, the last thing you want to look at is also under this formula auditing group, there's the remove arrows button, and when you click that, all of the blue arrows will disappear. So that's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, click the like button and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Have a great day.